So I'm going to show a couple different ways to put beads onto knitting. So these socks are my All the Bees socks from round 2 of Sock Madness this year, 2021. And ignore that they're in different size needles. These ones are just kind of place holding while I was knitting the next sock. So the first way, I'm going to show how to put a bead right here, and the pattern doesn't call for a bead right here, I'm just demonstrating. So the way I've been doing it has been with my wire tool that I made based on a post somebody else made. And so what this is just 24 gauge beading wire with some crimp beads. Okay, it's hard to focus. Crimp beads and some beads, and that's really just decorative and placeholder so the beads don't fall off the end. And I load this up. I've had up to 30 beads on here. I could have this whole string, whole wire filled if I wanted. And that's something I really like about it, this method, because I have little kids, other people might have pets. I don't want to have this open. I don't want to have a little dish with beads that can be knocked over. I'm certainly not leaving a pile of beads on the couch unless it's after 8 o'clock and everyone's in bed. So I like that I can work on this in the daytime by having these beads on this wire. They're not falling off. The kids who are capable of taking the beads off are also the kids who know better. So that's nice. So this is, I should be showing this one last because it's, in my opinion, of its superiority, but I just want to show how simple this is. So you stick it right here into your stitch until your stitch comes in, kind of like when you're basically threading it on. And so you have it in that hole. Pull it off the needle and just kind of hold on to it while I slide this bead up and stick it in here. Sometimes they stick a little bit, but this one went nice and smoothly. These are seed beads, size 8. And they just go on just like that. Put it back in your needle, pop the thing off the wire, and then you would knit that stitch and keep going. And so I really like this method. It has made it so that knitting and adding beads to my knitting is not interrupting things. I just stop, put it on, and go. Whereas some of these other methods are slightly more time consuming, and I like it quick. So that's the beading wire. You can also buy things like a Flegel beater I've heard of that more or less do the same thing. But this is nice because I didn't have to buy anything. I already had the tools for that, made it at home. The next method that I've been doing is with this. This is for threading floss when you have braces, which I do have. So you stick your floss through here, and then you stick this bit through your braces, and then the floss is on the other side of the wire, and you can floss your teeth. Very practical. Except that it's so hard to floss with braces. I got a cheap water flosser off Amazon, and as soon as it prevents one cavity, it's paid for itself. But the problem with that is, how do you know when you've prevented one cavity? So I just choose to believe it's worth the cost, even though it wasn't actually that much because it was a cheap one. So I showed that. I'm going to show how to bead with it. I just want to get one that I've already taken. So when you pull them out, it's this one solid piece, and first thing you're going to do is split that so that you got these 2 ends instead of 1. Now when you want to put a bead on your knitting, you can do the same thing as you did before and stick this through. And sometimes it's a little tricky. You might need to open it up with your needle a little bit. Pull it off this needle again. I find this one more fiddly just because I've got these 2 ends I'm working with, whereas with the wire, it's just that little bit more sturdy. So then you thread this on, pull it onto your stitch, stitch back on the needle, and then you knit that stitch. But the thing about that one is you have to do it one at a time. And so every time I need a bead, I need to get a bead, whether it's in here. I suppose I could keep like a chain of them on some spare yarn or something and then just take one off each time. But basically, you have to individually do it every time. And I did that for the first... No, I did that for a different pair of socks. For the whole pair of socks, a different pair that had less beads, and it was a little bit time consuming. And then, so that's why I made this for this pair, because I just knew I was going to need something faster. And then the last method for, no, sorry. If you don't have one of these, you can use beading wire. You can use floss that if you wax the end, if you have beeswax, you can use the wire from inside twist ties. There's lots of options. You just have to figure out what works for you. And also, there's another kind of floss that I couldn't find, but for braces, where it's normal, it's a cut string, a foot or 30 centimeters of regular floss, but the one end of it is very stiff, and that's so that you can thread it up through your wire, and then you can just floss. And those work the same way as this one does. You would thread it through the loop, and then bring the two ends together and floss the bead, and put it on your yarn, just like we did with this one. So I couldn't find mine, but it's basically the same thing. The third method for putting your beads onto your knitting is to use a crochet hook. This crochet hook is 2 millimeters and it's too big. I could not find for the life of me my other crochet hook, which I think might be 1 millimeter or 0.75 or even 0.5. I'm not sure. It's very tiny, and it is small enough to go through this little bead. And this one, as you can see, is just that little bit too big. It's not going to work. So, for demonstrative purposes only, I have this much bigger wooden bead. So, to use this, with those other methods, you would, with the floss, you put the floss on the yarn on the floss, and then the bead. And with this one, you pre-string the wire with beads, then you put the yarn on the wire, and then the beads. With the crochet hook, you load up your bead first. Well, bam. You would, use a smaller crochet hook to fit on the bead you actually want in your sock. Unless you want enormous beads in your socks. They probably won't fit in your shoe. But maybe if you're making a sweater, this would work. So, put the bead on the crochet hook. Okay, that thing is right in the way. And you put your hook through the loop. And pull it through, and now ideally you would have a small bead, and so the loop would fit through the bead. This is enormous. We're just going to yank that, make it real tight, pull it through. And this is kind of the downfall, the drawback of the crochet hook method, is that it's very easy to split your yarn. If you see the twist, the tiny crochet hook can get in between those plies and split your yarn a little bit, or you might drop the yarn while it's in the bead, and there. And then stick that back on your needle. This bead is too big for this, so this bead would probably, if I wanted to put these on knitting, it would have to be like worsted or bulky. And then you can knit it. So this is just so big. Yeah, some problems with this method is that it's really easy to split your yarn. It's hard to, when the crochet hook is small enough to go through such a little bead hole as that, then it's almost too small to pull this kind of yarn. It's really meant for lace weight or like thread. So so it's splitty, it doesn't always grab very well. But I do like that. That's probably my second favorite method for putting beads on. And this one is my favorite. So there you have it. 3 ways to put beads on your knitting. Thanks for watching.